Welcome back to True Echo, where real values echo louder than prejudice, and every story leaves a mark on your soul. Today's story is one you'll never forget, a tale of quiet strength, integrity, and the courage to do what's right even when the whole world is watching and waiting for you to fail. What happens when a young black female mechanic dares to stand up against workplace injustice, only to be fired for helping a desperate stranger? What she didn't know was that the man she helped was no ordinary biker. Stay with us to the end, because what unfolds will shock everyone. On a bitter December morning in the heart of Manhattan, the Lexington Avenue auto garage buzzed with urgency. Steam rose from hoods, air tools hissed and clanged, and overhead fluorescent lights cast sharp reflections on the shop's oil-streaked concrete floor. But amidst the chaos and noise, one figure moved with calm precision. Tasha Brooks, 20 years old and the only female mechanic in the shop, was flat on her back beneath a sleek red Mustang. Her dark blue coveralls were streaked with grease, her tightly braided hair tucked under a faded Yankees cap, and her eyes glinted with laser focus. She worked with efficiency, grace, and the kind of intuitive expertise that made even seasoned mechanics pause, though they'd never admit it. Despite being the best on the team, Tasha wasn't celebrated. She was tolerated. A target for side glances, whispered jokes, and cruel taunts. "Hey, sweetheart," Rick snorted one morning, twirling a socket wrench. "You sure you don't want to go answer phones up front? Might be easier for those tiny hands." The others snickered. Tasha didn't flinch. She'd learned long ago that silence sometimes screamed louder than rage. She'd grown up watching her mother take verbal beatings from supervisors with nothing but a straight back and a quiet heart. It wasn't that Tasha lacked fire, it was just waiting for the right spark. That spark arrived in the form of a sudden storm of leather and desperation. The garage door creaked open violently. A tall, rugged man burst in, eyes wild beneath the shadow of a Hell's Angels helmet. His leather jacket bore the patches of one of the most feared biker groups on the East Coast, and the tattoos on his knuckles told stories of survival and rebellion. The room froze. "I need help, right now," he said, voice sharp with panic. "My bike's dead a block away, and my daughter, she was just in an accident. I need to get to the hospital now." The shop went silent. Every mechanic turned back to their tasks. The air filled with the subtle hiss of judgment and indifference. Rick spoke first, smirking. "Wrong place, man. We don't fix busted biker dreams here." A few chuckled, cruel and low. Derek Mason, the shop's hard-nosed manager, stepped forward. His arms were crossed, and his expression made it clear he was more concerned about appearances than emergencies. "We don't do charity, especially not for Hell's Angels. You'll have to try elsewhere," he said flatly. The biker, Ray Carter, looked like someone had punched him in the chest. His voice cracked, "I'll pay anything. I just need 10 minutes. Derek didn't budge. "Not our problem." Tasha emerged from beneath the Mustang, face grim. Every fiber in her body told her to look away, to stay quiet. But her soul didn't listen. "I'll do it," she said, wiping her hands. "Tell me where your bike is." A stunned hush fell over the shop. Derek's face turned to stone. "Brooks, don't even think about it. You walk out that door, don't bother coming back." Tasha stared at him. "Then I guess I don't need to come back." Without another word, she grabbed her toolkit, nodded to Ray, and followed him out. The cold outside bit into Tasha's skin like tiny knives, but her stride remained firm. Ray led her to the end of the block where his Harley-Davidson slumped against the curb, lifeless and cold. She knelt beside it, already spotting the signs of neglect, corroded terminals, a loose ignition coil, something she could fix with her eyes closed. But it wasn't just the machine she was tuning into. It was the man standing beside her, his shoulders tense, his jaw clenched, his breaths quick and shallow. "How old's your daughter?" she asked gently while examining the wires. 17, Ray said. "She just got her license. Truck ran a red They say it's bad. Real bad. The words came out choked, like each one tore his throat raw. Tasha nodded once, focused on the work but heart tugged by the rawness in his voice. You'll make it. Just give me 5 minutes. She worked with swift, sure hands, cleaning a fouled plug and reattaching a frayed wire. It wasn't perfect, but it would run. Just as she gave the starter a sharp twist with her screwdriver, the Harley came alive with a thunderous growl. Ray exhaled a shaky laugh of relief, then turned to Tasha. You're a damn angel, he muttered, gripping her shoulder. You don't even know what this means to me. Before she could respond, a sharp voice rang out behind them. Tasha Brooks. Derek Mason stood at the edge of the sidewalk, hands clenched into fists, eyes smoldering with fury. A few of the other mechanics had stepped out to watch, arms folded, faces unreadable. You were warned. This is insubordination, Derek said, spitting the words like venom. Tasha stood slowly, wiping her hands on her coveralls. I did what any decent person would do. You disobeyed direct orders. You embarrassed me in front of customers. Pack your things. Tasha felt the hit deep in her gut, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she turned to Ray and handed him the wrench. Go, she said, her voice steady. She's waiting. Ray looked like he might say something, but the roar of the engine answered for him. He took off like a bullet, disappearing into Manhattan traffic with a grateful nod. The silence left in his wake felt suffocating. Tasha turned and walked back toward the shop, her future with every step growing more uncertain. She passed Derek without looking at him, brushed past the other mechanics who now seemed hesitant, guilty, or too cowardly to meet her eyes. Inside, the garage was quieter than usual. The noise of tools had dimmed, the radio turned down, the usual jabs and laughter vanished. Tasha moved to her locker and began packing her things, her personal wrench set, a photo of her mother tucked inside the door, and a worn notebook filled with custom engine notes she'd collected over the years. She kept her movements methodical and her breathing even, refusing to let them see her break. As she zipped her duffel shut, Derek hovered nearby like a vulture, arms folded. I hope it was worth it, he muttered. Tasha slung the bag over her shoulder and turned to him. It was, she said. Every second of it. She walked out of the garage, not looking back. But the silence that followed her exit wasn't empty. It was a shift. Tasha walked the long blocks home with her duffel bag slung over her shoulder and her dignity intact, but inside, the reality of what had just happened pressed on her chest like a vice. She had no backup plan. No savings to float her through the month. Her mother's medications weren't cheap. Rent was already late. And the city? The city didn't care. Still, Tasha didn't regret what she'd done. She couldn't. Not after the look on Ray's face. Not after hearing that his daughter might not have made it if he'd arrived a moment later. By the time she reached the third-floor walk-up, her hands were numb and her breath fogged in the stairwell. She kicked the door open, stepped inside, and let the silence hit her. It wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. She dropped the duffel, sat down on the threadbare couch, and stared at the floor. It wasn't until she looked at the framed photo of her and her mother on the table that she finally let the tears come. I'm sorry, Mama, she whispered. Tasha cried, not out of weakness, but from the sheer exhaustion of carrying so much, so long, for so little in return. Then, there was a knock at the door. She wiped her eyes quickly, her heart suddenly pounding. Landlord? Bill collector? But when she opened the door, there was no angry man or piece of mail. Just a single folded note. No envelope. Just her name printed in firm, professional handwriting. Ms. Brooks, please return to the garage immediately. I need to see you. James Carter, CEO. Tasha blinked. James Carter. She had only heard that name in whispered tones, legendary, untouchable, the mysterious figure behind the auto shop empire. Derek used to drop it in conversation like a badge of honor, but no one had ever met him face to face. Why would he want to see her? Suspicion crept in. Had Derek twisted the truth? Was she walking into a trap? But curiosity, and something else, kept her from turning away. If there was even a sliver of a chance to be heard, to explain, she had to take it. When she returned to the garage, the sun was slipping beneath the skyscrapers and casting long shadows. The usually raucous shop was still lit, but unnaturally quiet. Her former co-workers glanced up and then quickly looked away, as though her presence burned their pride. But this time, their silence didn't wound her, it empowered her. Inside the manager's office, the air was thick with tension. James Carter stood tall and composed in a charcoal gray wool coat, his salt and pepper beard trimmed to perfection. His face was expressionless, but his eyes were sharp and assessing. Beside him, a figure Tasha hadn't expected, Ray Carter. Ray gave her a soft, grateful smile. His presence calmed her more than any words could. "Miss Brooks," James said, motioning her to sit. His voice carried the weight of someone used to commanding rooms full of suits and skeptics. "Yes, sir," she said, sitting with her back straight and her hands in her lap. "I've been informed of yesterday's events," James said, shooting a cold glance at Derek, who stood off to the side, pale and sweating. "It appears my own brother walked into one of our shops and was treated like a criminal." Derek opened his mouth, but James raised a hand. "Don't speak." The room fell still. James turned back to Tasha. "You knew none of that at the time. You didn't help Ray because of who he is. You helped because it was the right thing to do. And you were fired for it." Tasha kept her gaze steady. "Yes, sir. I was." James exhaled slowly. "That tells me more about you than any resume ever could." He turned to Derek, whose lip trembled now. "Your leadership failed, Mr. Mason. You fostered an environment where disrespect, bias, and intimidation go unchecked. That ends tonight." Then he turned back to Tasha. "I want to hear your story. All of it. No interruptions." For the first time since walking into that garage, Tasha felt truly seen. And for the first time in her life, someone powerful was finally listening. The office was silent except for the faint buzz of fluorescent lights and the soft hum of the city filtering through the sealed windows. Tasha sat upright, heart racing but her voice steady. She didn't need to rehearse what to say, she'd lived it. "I came to this shop 6 months ago," she began, eyes locked on James Carter. "Fresh out of technical college. Top of my class. I was excited, grateful even. I thought this was my chance to prove that I belonged." Derek scoffed quietly behind her. James shot him a look that made him freeze. "But from day one," Tasha continued, "I was treated like a joke. My size, my gender, my skin, everything about me was a target. They laughed behind my back. Called me sweetheart and rookie, like my skills didn't matter. I worked harder than anyone in that garage. Stayed late. Fixed every mistake, even the ones I didn't make. And still, I was invisible." Ray shifted in his seat, his expression tight with empathy. James folded his hands and nodded, giving her the floor without interruption. "But yesterday," her voice faltered slightly, but she pressed on, "I saw a man who looked just as desperate as I've felt. Turned away for how he looked. Ignored. Mocked. I knew what that felt like. I couldn't be part of it. Not again." She paused, and for a moment the room breathed with her. "So, I helped," she said. "And if I could go back, I'd do it again." James leaned back in his chair, clearly impressed by her composure, her fire. He exchanged a brief glance with Ray, who gave a slow nod of agreement. "Well," James said finally, his tone shifting, "you just passed the hardest test this company has to offer." Tasha blinked. "Sir. You stood up for our core values when no one else did," James said. That tells me everything I need to know about your character, and everything I need to know about the leadership under Derek Mason. Derek stiffened. You're finished here, James said sharply. Effective immediately. It was so sudden, so final, that Derek didn't speak. His jaw twitched as he looked to the mechanics beyond the office door for support. But there were no allies left. Even Rick, who had once made Tasha's life miserable, stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Clear out your desk, James said coldly. Security will escort you. Derek clenched his fists and stormed out, slamming the office door behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. James turned back to Tasha. I'd like to offer you the position of lead technician, he said plainly. With full authority to help reshape the culture of this garage, and a significant raise to match. You won't just be working here, Tasha. You'll be leading. Tasha felt the air catch in her lungs. Her voice trembled now, but from joy. I don't know what to say. James smiled for the first time. Say yes. And then show them what leadership really looks like. Tasha nodded, eyes misting. Yes. Absolutely, yes. Ray stood and offered his hand. You saved me, he said warmly. Now, it's our turn to make sure no one ever treats you like less again. For the first time since walking into that garage, Tasha Brooks didn't feel like the outcast. She felt like the future. By the time word spread that Tasha Brooks had been offered the position of lead technician, the mood in the garage had shifted completely. No one dared to laugh anymore. No snide remarks echoed through the work bays. Even Rick, who had once been the ringleader of her daily torment, kept his head down, avoiding her gaze. But Tasha didn't want revenge. She wanted respect. And more importantly, she wanted change. The next morning, she stepped through the same garage doors she once left in shame. But this time, her head was high, her stride confident, and every tool in her belt felt like armor. James Carter had followed through. Derek Mason was gone, and a company-wide memo had been sent that outlined zero tolerance for harassment and discrimination. A training initiative would begin in 2 weeks, and Tasha would co-lead it. Every mechanic in that garage would have to sit down and listen to her story, and learn from it. Still, walking past her former co-workers wasn't easy. As she reached the central workbench, Rick approached, his shoulders tense and his eyes downcast. Tasha, he said awkwardly, I owe you an apology. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I was a jerk, he continued. I saw you working twice as hard and still treated you like trash. You didn't deserve any of it. And what you did for that biker. That was brave. Tasha considered him for a long moment. I'm not asking for pity, Rick, she said, voice steady. But if you're serious about changing how things are around here, then you'll show it. Not with words, but with how you treat the next girl who walks through that door. Rick nodded, guilt etched into his face. Understood. By lunchtime, the entire garage had fallen into a rhythm. But this time, it was different. Eyes didn't roll when Tasha gave an order. No one questioned her diagnosis. And when she spoke, they listened. Still, even with the new position and the better paycheck, she knew real change wouldn't happen overnight. Respect couldn't be mandated. It had to be earned, and demanded, every single day. Later that evening, as she closed up her toolbox, Ray Carter appeared by the doorway. He looked more relaxed, the tension gone from his shoulders, but his blue eyes were as clear and sincere as ever. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said. Tasha smiled. Not at all. What's up? I just came from the hospital, Ray said. My daughter's awake. She's going to be okay. Stable. Talking. Laughing even. Tasha felt her heart lift with joy. That's amazing, Ray. I'm so glad. Ray stepped closer, pulling something from his pocket. A small chain with a silver wrench charm. "She's a fighter, just like you," he said, placing it in her hand. "And she asked me to give you this. Said you're the reason her dad got to be there when she woke up." Tasha stared down at the tiny token. Her fingers curled around it slowly. She'd faced humiliation, job loss, and near despair. But this? This was what it was all for. "Tell her I said thank you," Tasha whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Ray nodded, eyes shining. "You're going to change this place, Tasha. I can feel it." "I plan to," she said with quiet certainty. "And not just this garage." The weeks that followed marked a complete transformation at the Lexington Avenue Auto Garage. It wasn't just that Derek Mason was gone, it was that the culture he had curated, built on fear, bias, and silent compliance, had finally been broken. And at the heart of it all stood Tasha Brooks. Every morning, she arrived before anyone else, unlocking the front door not as an outsider, but as the leader of a team she had once quietly suffered among. Her new role as lead technician wasn't just about assigning tasks or overseeing repairs, it was about laying new foundations. The training sessions James had promised began in earnest. Employees were required to attend 3 workshops: workplace respect, inclusive leadership, and responding to bias in real time. Tasha, alongside an HR facilitator, stood at the front of the room. It wasn't easy. Some mechanics sat with arms crossed, visibly uncomfortable. Others nodded along but still avoided her in the shop. Change, Tasha realized, wasn't about snapping fingers. It was about planting seeds and refusing to let them be choked by weeds. One afternoon, as she finished presenting a case study, based loosely on her own experience, Rick raised his hand. "Can I say something?" Tasha paused, unsure what was coming, but nodded. "I used to think being a good mechanic meant being the fastest or strongest. But you showed me something else," he said, eyes meeting hers with humility. "You showed me that being good means doing what's right, even when it costs you. I was wrong about you. And I was wrong about what leadership looks like." A hush fell over the room. Tasha felt a lump rise in her throat. "Thank you, Rick," she said quietly. "That means something." By the end of the session, a few of the guys approached her, ones who had never spoken to her directly before. "Need help organizing the parts room?" one asked. "You're a beast with diagnostics, mind teaching me that trick with the sensors?" Little gestures. But they mattered. Back in the office, James Carter observed from a distance, watching her grow into her role with pride. "She's better than we ever were," he said one afternoon to Ray. "She's going to take this place further than we imagined." Ray grinned. "Told you." Tasha didn't rest on her title. She got her certifications renewed. Enrolled in an evening business management course. Began building a mentorship program for other young women entering the trades. When a local high school asked if she'd speak to their vocational students, she agreed without hesitation. On a rainy Thursday, she stood before a class of 16-year-olds, mostly boys, some black, some Latino, a few girls in the back row, wide-eyed and uncertain. Tasha pulled a wrench from her pocket and held it up. "This," she said. "This changed my life. Not because it's shiny. But because no one expected me to hold it. And when I did, they had to pay attention." The students leaned in, mesmerized. Tasha saw something in their faces she'd rarely seen in her peers: hope without filters. Curiosity without judgment. "If you love building things," she continued, "don't let anyone tell you where you do or don't belong. You make space. You take space." She returned to the garage that afternoon soaked but smiling. Rick handed her a warm coffee and a towel, and for the first time, it didn't feel awkward, it felt like camaraderie. Later that night, as she closed up shop, she lingered in the garage doorway. The city lights shimmered in puddles on the street. And for once, her reflection staring back from the glass looked not like a girl trying to survive, but a woman determined to lead. Winter slowly gave way to spring in Manhattan. The bitter wind that once scraped against the Lexington Avenue garage was replaced with warmth and fresh air drifting in through the raised bay doors. Inside, everything looked the same, tools hanging in neat rows, engines humming, grease staining the floor. But the spirit of the place had changed completely. It was no longer a cage of hierarchy and silence. It was Tasha Brooks' domain now. And it thrived. The garage had just landed a contract with a citywide courier company thanks to James Carter's endorsement, and Tasha had been put in charge of the rollout. Her team, yes, her team, worked with discipline and pride, not fear. Even the oldest mechanics had started taking notes from her. And the younger ones? They saw her as a role model. One Friday afternoon, as the last job of the day wrapped up, James and Ray Carter arrived unannounced. They stepped onto the floor not as corporate ghosts, but as supporters. The garage fell quiet for a moment as James called everyone together. "I just wanted to say," he began, "we've seen one of the most incredible transformations in this shop's history. And it wasn't because we changed a manager or signed new contracts, it was because one person reminded us what we stand for." He turned to Tasha, his voice filled with pride. "Tasha Brooks, you didn't just fix a bike. You fixed this place." The entire team erupted in applause, not polite, not forced. Real. Tasha felt tears well in her eyes, but she didn't cry. She smiled. Not because she had something to prove anymore, but because she had already proven it. Ray stepped forward and handed her a framed plaque. Presented to Tasha Brooks, for leadership, courage, and compassion in the face of injustice. As she took it in her hands, a voice called out from the back, "Rick again. Speech. Come on, boss." Tasha laughed, then cleared her throat as the room settled. "I never wanted a title," she said. "I just wanted a fair shot. To do what I love. To be seen for what I could do, not dismissed because of who I am." She paused, scanning the faces in front of her. "I know what it's like to feel alone in a place where you give your all and still get told you're not enough. So if you ever see someone struggling, don't look away. Don't stay quiet. Be better than that. Be what you needed when you were the one ignored." A beat of silence. Then more applause. Afterward, as the garage emptied out, Ray lingered behind with her, leaning against the same red Mustang she once worked on when all this began. "My daughter wants to meet you, you know," he said with a grin. "She keeps calling you the bike angel." Tasha chuckled. "Tell her I'd love that." Ray nodded and held out his hand. "You changed my life, Tasha. And not just mine." She shook it, firm and proud. When he left, Tasha stood alone in the quiet garage. She looked around at the place where she had once been invisible, where she had been mocked, dismissed, and fired. And now, it was hers. Not just the job. The respect. The legacy. As the sun dipped low and the neon lights flickered on, she slipped the wrenched charm Ray had given her into her pocket. A reminder of that day. That choice. And then she turned off the lights and stepped out into the glowing city. A mechanic. A leader. A story worth remembering. Tasha Brooks' journey reminds us that doing what's right often comes at a cost, but the reward is greater than any paycheck or promotion. Her story is a powerful reminder: compassion is not weakness, and silence in the face of injustice is never neutral. As Tasha once said, "Be what you needed when you were the one ignored." Thank you for watching this inspiring story on True Echo. If this story moved you, please like, comment with your thoughts, and share it with someone who needs encouragement. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real stories that echo louder than hate. We'll see you next time.